October 1936. A burning mansion, a body floating in an ancient pond, and secrets buried for 20 years, finally rising from the grave. When Hercule Poirot receives a desperate letter from Lady Emmeline Ashworth, he expects a simple case of mysterious notes and ghostly sightings. What he discovers is far more deadly. A nursemaid strangled and drowned, a child vanished without trace, and a weekend gathering where everyone has something to hide, and someone has everything to lose. But here's the question that haunts me. If you witnessed a murder but speaking the truth would destroy your own life, would you stay silent? Mrs. Blackwood did, for 20 years, and tonight that silence will cost lives. Welcome to the cottage crime. If you love classic murder mysteries with twisted endings, subscribe now and hit that bell, because Poirot's most dangerous case is about to begin. Let's dive in. The autumn of 1936 had painted the English countryside in shades of amber and rust when Hercule Poirot received the letter that would draw him into one of his most perplexing cases. He sat in his immaculate London flat, the morning light streaming through precisely arranged curtains, when his valet, George, presented the envelope upon a silver tray. The paper was of excellent quality, cream-colored, thick, bearing the embossed crest of a family whose name Poirot recognized from the society pages. "From Lady Emmeline Ashworth," Poirot murmured, his gray cells already stirring with curiosity. He retrieved his silver letter opener and sliced the envelope with surgical precision. "Dear Monsieur Poirot, I write to you in a state of considerable distress. For the past fortnight, strange occurrences have plagued Willowmere Cottage, my family's ancestral retreat in the village of Little Barton. Objects have vanished, threatening notes have appeared beneath doors, and 3 nights ago I witnessed a figure in the garden, a specter, some would say, though I am not a woman given to fancy. My late husband, Sir Frederick, always spoke highly of your remarkable talents. I beg you to come to Willowmere this weekend. I am hosting a small gathering of family and intimate friends, and I fear something dreadful is brewing beneath the surface of our pleasant company. Your presence would bring me immeasurable comfort. With desperate regards, Lady Emmeline Ashworth." Poirot stroked his magnificent mustache thoughtfully. A country cottage, a gathering of suspects, for that is what such assemblies inevitably became, and a woman of noble bearing reduced to writing letters of desperation. "George," he announced, "we shall require the leather valise, the brown one, naturellement, and my warmest overcoat. We travel to the countryside." George's expression remained perfectly neutral, though Poirot detected the slightest flicker of concern in his eyes. "The countryside, sir? The mud, sir?" "Oui, the mud." Poirot sighed heavily. "But crime, it does not confine itself to the civilized streets of London. It ventures also to these rustic places where the English inexplicably choose to spend their weekends. The journey to Little Barton required a train from Paddington, followed by a motor car arranged by Lady Ashworth's household. As the vehicle wound through narrow lanes bordered by ancient hedgerows, Poirot observed the landscape with a mixture of aesthetic appreciation and physical discomfort. The village itself was precisely what one would expect: a Norman church with a mossy graveyard, a public house called the Crooked Plough, cottages with thatched roofs, and gardens preparing for winter's slumber. Charming in its fashion, if one appreciated such things. Willowmere Cottage, despite its modest name, proved to be a substantial dwelling of honeyed Cotswold stone. Climbing roses, now faded and brown, clung to its walls. Mullioned windows reflected the late afternoon sky. A gravel drive curved gracefully to the entrance, where a butler of advancing years awaited. "Monsieur Poirot," the butler intoned, his voice carrying the weight of decades in service. "Lady Ashworth has been expecting you. I am Holbrook, if you will follow me." The interior of Willowmere possessed that peculiarly English atmosphere of accumulated history. Portraits of stern ancestors lined the hallways, Persian carpets, slightly worn, softened footsteps. The scent of wood smoke and beeswax polish hung in the air. Lady Emmeline Ashworth received him in the drawing-room, a woman of perhaps 60 years, silver-haired and elegant despite the worry that shadowed her refined features. She rose from a wing-back chair beside the fireplace, extending her hand. "Monsieur Poirot, you cannot know what relief your presence brings me. Madame, your letter spoke of disturbances, of threatening notes and mysterious figures. You will tell me everything from the very beginning." Before Lady Ashworth could respond, the drawing-room door opened and a young woman entered, dark-haired, pale, with eyes that held secrets. "Ah," said Lady Ashworth, her voice tightening almost imperceptibly. "My niece, Miss Violet Crane. She arrived yesterday, quite unexpectedly." Miss Crane smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Uncle Frederick always said one should never announce one's arrivals. It spoils the surprise." Poirot noted the tension that crackled between aunt and niece. Already the little gray cells whispered, "The plot? It thickens." Through the window, he observed other guests arriving, a motor car depositing figures who would, before the weekend concluded, become witnesses, suspects, or perhaps victims. The game, as his English friends might say, was afoot. Chapter 2. The Gathering of Shadows. That evening, the drawing-room of Willowmere Cottage came alive with the soft glow of oil lamps and the crackling warmth of the fireplace. Poirot, seated in a corner chair that afforded him an excellent view of all present, observed the assembled guests with the keen attention of a scientist studying specimens beneath a microscope. Lady Ashworth had arranged the gathering with the precision of a military commander. Sherry was served in crystal glasses. A gramophone in the corner played Chopin softly. The atmosphere was one of cultivated elegance, yet beneath it, Poirot detected undercurrents of anxiety, resentment, and something darker still. The guests numbered 7, excluding himself and his hostess. First, there was Miss Violet Crane, the unexpected niece, who had changed into an evening dress of deep burgundy. She stood by the window, a cigarette holder poised between slender fingers, gazing into the darkness of the garden as though expecting someone, or something. Then came Colonel Marcus Ashworth, Lady Emmeline's brother-in-law, a man of military bearing with a face weathered by Indian summers. His mustache, Poirot noted with professional disapproval, was decidedly unkempt. The colonel clutched his whiskey glass with unnecessary force, his knuckles whitening periodically. "Dashed nonsense, all of it," the colonel muttered to no one in particular. "Spectres and threatening notes. Emmeline's nerves, nothing more." "You dismiss too quickly, Colonel," came a silky voice. This belonged to Dr. Sebastian Vance, a man of perhaps 45, with silver-streaked hair and eyes of unsettling intelligence. He was, Lady Ashworth had explained, the family physician and an old friend. Oh, the mind can play tricks, certainly, but sometimes what we perceive as imagination is merely truth we refuse to accept. Philosophical drivel, the colonel snorted. Near the fireplace sat Mr. and Mrs. Theodore Pemberton. Theodore was a solicitor handling the Ashworth estate, a thin, nervous man whose spectacles perpetually slipped down his narrow nose. His wife, Cecily, was a plump woman with an unfortunate habit of nervous laughter. They represented money and law, Poirot mused, two elements that frequently accompanied murder. The sixth guest was young Mr. James Hartley, a writer of some modest reputation. He had been engaged to catalogue Sir Frederick's extensive library, a task that had kept him at Willowmere for 3 months. Poirot observed how Mr. Hartley's eyes followed Miss Violet Crane with barely concealed devotion. Love, unrequited or otherwise, was another ingredient in the recipe for tragedy. Finally, there was Mrs. Dorothy Blackwood, a widow of independent means and Lady Ashworth's oldest friend. She sat ramrod straight, observing everything with sharp, bird-like eyes. Her black dress spoke of perpetual mourning, though her husband had died 15 years prior. "Monsieur Poirot," Lady Ashworth announced, drawing the room's attention, "has graciously agreed to spend the weekend with us. He is, as many of you know, a detective of considerable reputation." The effect of this announcement was immediate and varied. Colonel Ashworth's face reddened. Dr. Vance smiled enigmatically. Mr. Pemberton dropped his sherry glass, sending crystal shards across the Persian carpet. Mrs. Pemberton laughed nervously. James Hartley paled. Miss Crane's expression remained unchanged, though she extinguished her cigarette with deliberate slowness. Only Mrs. Blackwood seemed unsurprised. "A detective?" Colonel Ashworth sputtered. "Really, Emmeline, is that necessary?" "I believe it is, Marcus, given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" James Hartley asked, his voice unsteady. "Lady Ashworth mentioned nothing alarming in her invitation." "Because, Mr. Hartley," Poirot interjected softly, "the alarming details were reserved for my letter alone. 3 threatening notes, objects of value mysteriously vanished, and a figure, seen in the garden at midnight." Silence descended upon the room like a heavy curtain. "Perhaps," Dr. Vance suggested smoothly, "Lady Ashworth would share these notes with us all. Transparency might ease collective anxiety." Lady Ashworth hesitated, then nodded to Holbrook, who produced a small silver tray bearing 3 folded papers. Poirot rose and examined them with care. The first read, "The sins of the father visit the children." The second, "What was buried shall be unearthed." The third, most disturbing, "Before the weekend ends, blood will answer for blood." "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. Somewhere in the house, a clock struck 9. The wind outside had risen, rattling the ancient windows, and in that moment the lights flickered, once, twice, before plunging Willowmere Cottage into complete darkness. A woman screamed. When the lights returned, barely 30 seconds later, everyone stood frozen in their positions, except one. Miss Violet Crane had vanished from the room, and upon the carpet where she had stood lay a single white rose, its petals stained unmistakably with fresh blood. Chapter 3. The Secret in the Garden. The room erupted into chaos. Mrs. Pemberton succumbed to hysterics, her nervous laughter transforming into genuine sobs. Colonel Ashworth bellowed for order. Dr. Vance knelt beside the blood-stained rose, examining it with clinical detachment. "Silence!" Poirot's voice cut through the pandemonium with surprising authority. "Mesdames et messieurs, we must remain calm. Panic serves only the criminal. Lady Ashworth clutched the mantelpiece for support. "Violet, my niece, where has she gone?" "That, madame, is precisely what we shall determine." Poirot turned to Holbrook, who had materialized from the shadows with remarkable composure. "The electricity, it failed throughout the house?" "Indeed, monsieur. A fault in the generator. I presume it is housed in the garden shed." And during those 30 seconds of darkness, Miss Crane departed this room. Yet the door, I was watching it, even in blackness, did not open. Poirot's eyes swept the drawing-room walls. "There is another exit." James Hartley stepped forward, his face ashen. "The priest hole, behind the oak paneling near the window. This cottage dates to the 16th century. Catholics hid from persecution here. You know this house intimately, Monsieur Hartley. 3 months cataloging Sir Frederick's library. One learns things." Poirot approached the paneling where Violet had stood. His fingers explored the carved oak roses until, click, a section swung inward, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. "Fascinating," Dr. Vance murmured. "A hidden corridor, and Miss Crane knew of its existence." Or, Mrs. Blackwood spoke for the first time, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Someone forced her through it." Colonel Ashworth retrieved an oil lamp from the sideboard. "Enough speculation. We search immediately." "Non." Poirot raised his hand. "Colonel Ashworth and myself only. The others will remain here. Holbrook, you will ensure no one departs this room." "But surely," Theodore Pemberton protested. "Monsieur Pemberton, in matters of investigation, Hercule Poirot does not negotiate. You will stay." The priest-hole passage was cramped and ancient, smelling of centuries-old dust and secrets long buried. Poirot, despite his distaste for physical discomfort, proceeded with determination. Colonel Ashworth followed, lamp held high, his breathing heavy. "Blasted tight squeeze," the colonel muttered. "Haven't been in here since Frederick and I were boys. Used to play smugglers." "You were close with your brother, Colonel?" A pause. "Once, before the war, changed everything." The passage twisted downward, stone steps worn smooth by forgotten feet. Finally, it opened into a small chamber, and beyond, a wooden door hung ajar, revealing the night garden. Cold air rushed in. Moonlight illuminated an overgrown path leading toward a structure barely visible through twisted yew trees. The old gardener's cottage, Colonel Ashworth identified. Abandoned 20 years now. Frederick intended to renovate it, but then his health declined. They emerged into the garden. October frost crunched beneath their shoes. Somewhere, an owl called mournfully. The gardener's cottage loomed ahead, its windows dark as dead eyes. "Colonel, your lamp? Oh, s'il vous plaît." As they approached, Poirot noticed disturbances in the frost, footprints, multiple sets, leading both toward and away from the cottage. Someone had been here recently, perhaps many someones. The cottage door creaked open at Poirot's touch. Inside, dust and decay greeted them, but also signs of recent habitation. A blanket upon a rotting chaise, candle stubs, empty tins of food. "Someone has been living here," Poirot observed. "Impossible. The estate is private. Holbrook patrols regularly." And yet, the evidence speaks otherwise. In the corner, Poirot discovered something that made his gray cells fire with electricity. A leather satchel partially hidden beneath the blanket. Inside, newspaper clippings, yellowed with age, all concerning a single event. A tragedy at Willowmere. Nursemaid drowns in pond. Ashworth family. Mourns domestic servant inquest returns verdict of accidental death. The dates were from October 1916, 20 years ago, precisely. Colonel, Poirot said slowly, who was this nursemaid? The colonel's face had drained of all color. The lamp trembled in his grip. Her name was Rose Whitmore. She cared for Frederick's daughter, little Elizabeth, before the drowning. And what happened to Elizabeth? She died. Influenza. The winter following Rose's accident. She was only 4 years old. Poirot studied the colonel's trembling hands, the sweat upon his brow despite the cold. You are not telling me everything, Colonel. A nursemaid drowns, a child dies, and now, 20 years later, threatening notes speak of sins and blood. What truly happened in 1916? Before the colonel could respond, a scream pierced the night, high, terrified, unmistakably female, coming from the direction of Willowmere Cottage. They ran. The drawing room was in disarray. Mrs. Pemberton had fainted. Theodore Pemberton knelt beside her, fanning uselessly. Mrs. Blackwood stood rigid, pointing toward the French windows. There, pressed against the glass from outside, was a face, pale, ghostly, streaked with something dark. The face of Violet Crane. And behind her in the moonlit garden stood a figure in white, watching, waiting, before dissolving into the mist like a phantom. Chapter 4. The Phantom's Warning. Poirot rushed to the French windows, unlocking them with trembling fingers. Violet Crane collapsed inward, her burgundy dress torn, her arms scratched by thorns. Dr. De Vance was beside her instantly, professional instincts overriding all other considerations. "Brandy," he commanded, "and blankets. She is suffering from shock and exposure." James Hartley removed his dinner jacket, wrapping it around Violet's shaking shoulders with tender care. His devotion, Poirot noted, was no longer concealed. In moments of crisis, masks tend to slip. "Miss Crane," Poirot knelt before her, his voice gentle yet insistent. "What happened? Where did you go?" Her eyes, wild, unfocused, slowly found his face. "The passage. I did not choose to enter it. Someone pushed me, a hand, cold as death, upon my back. You saw no one?" "Darkness, complete darkness. I stumbled through, found myself in the garden." She clutched James Hartley's jacket tighter. "Then I saw her." "Her?" "The woman in white, standing by the pond. She raised her hand and pointed at me. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. Only silence. Terrible silence." Mrs. Blackwood inhaled sharply. "The pond, where Rose Whitmore drowned." "You know this story, madame?" Poirot asked. "Everyone in Little Barton knows it. The nursemaid who walked into the water on a moonless night. They said she was troubled, melancholic, but there were whispers." Mrs. Blackwood glanced at Lady Ashworth. "Whispers of something darker. Dorothy, please." Lady Ashworth's voice carried warning. "No, Emmeline. If you have summoned a detective, then truth must be told, however painful." Mrs. Blackwood straightened her mourning dress. "Rose Whitmore did not drown by accident, nor by her own hand. She was murdered. Everyone suspected it. No one dared speak it." The silence that followed was profound. The fire crackled. A wind howled against ancient windows. Each face in the room betrayed different emotions. Fear, guilt, recognition, calculation. "Murdered," Poirot repeated softly. "By whom, Madame Blackwood?" That question destroyed this family once. Must it do so again? Poirot insisted that Violet be taken to her room under Dr. Vance's supervision. He then demanded, more accurately, that Lady Ashworth provide complete honesty regarding the events of 1916. They retired to Sir Frederick's study, a masculine sanctuary of leather-bound books and hunting trophies. Lady Ashworth sat behind her late husband's mahogany desk, suddenly appearing older than her years. You must understand, Monsieur Poirot, that Frederick never recovered from Elizabeth's death. His daughter was everything to him. When she died, mere months after Rose, something inside him shattered permanently. Tell me about Rose Whitmore. Lady Ashworth closed her eyes. She came to us in spring of 1915, young, pretty, excellent references from a family in Hampshire. Elizabeth adored her. We all did. All? A pause laden with meaning. My husband was susceptible to feminine beauty, and I, during that period, was frequently unwell, confined to my room for weeks at a time. You suggest an improper relationship between Sir Frederick and the nursemaid? I suggest nothing. I observed everything. Bitterness crept into her refined voice. Frederick was not discreet. Servants talk. The village talked. I endured silently, as wives of that generation were expected to do. And Colonel Ashworth, what was his relationship with Miss Whitmore? Lady Ashworth's eyes opened sharply. Why do you ask about Marcus specifically? Because, madame, when I mentioned Rose Whitmore's name, the Colonel's reaction was most pronounced. Fear, guilt, recognition, all present in his expression. Marcus was also attentive to Rose. The brothers, I fear, were rivals in more than childhood games. Poirot stroked his mustache thoughtfully. Two brothers. One beautiful nursemaid, a classic triangle leading to tragedy. But there is more, is there not? The child, Elizabeth, how did she truly die? Lady Ashworth rose abruptly, moving to the window. Outside, moonlight silvered the garden where ancient secrets lay buried. Elizabeth did not die of influenza, Monsieur Poirot. She disappeared. Disappeared? One night, 3 months after Rose's drowning, Elizabeth vanished from her nursery. We searched everywhere, the grounds, the village, the woods. Nothing. Frederick was destroyed. He blamed himself. He blamed Marcus. He blamed everyone. Her voice broke. Eventually, we told society she had died of illness. It was easier than endless questions, easier than admitting the truth. Which was that someone took our child, and we never discovered who or why. Poirot approached the window, standing beside the grieving widow. Madame, I must ask a question of great delicacy. Is it possible that Elizabeth did not die? That she lived, perhaps raised elsewhere, and has now returned? Lady Ashworth turned to face him, her expression one of dawning horror. You mean Violet? Your niece, who arrived unexpectedly, whose age would correspond precisely with Elizabeth's had she survived. Who bears, if I am not mistaken? Oh, did you, madame? Or did you attend a christening? Children of similar age can be substituted, especially when families are distant and visits infrequent. Before Lady Ashworth could respond, a tremendous crash echoed from upstairs, followed by Dr. Vance's shout of alarm. They rushed upward, hearts pounding. Violet's room was in chaos, furniture overturned, curtains torn. The window stood open, cold air pouring in. Dr. Vance lay unconscious upon the carpet, blood seeping from a wound on his temple. And Violet Crane was gone. Once more. This time, a note pinned to her pillow with an antique hat pin. The daughter returns to claim her inheritance. Before dawn, the truth shall be paid in blood. Chapter 5. Secrets beneath the surface. Dr. Vance regained consciousness slowly, his elegant features contorted with pain and confusion. Poirot knelt beside him while Colonel Ashworth pressed a dampened cloth to the physician's wounded temple. "What happened, doctor? You must tell us everything." Vance winced. "I was attending to Miss Crane. She seemed calmer, almost drowsy. I turned to prepare a mild sedative, and then... impact. Something struck me from behind. I saw nothing, heard nothing. The attacker entered through the window? Impossible." James Hartley examined the casement with trembling hands. "We are on the second floor. No ladder, no climbing roses strong enough to support weight. How could anyone—" "The same way Miss Crane departed the drawing-room earlier," Mrs. Blackwood interrupted from the doorway. "This house is riddled with secret passages. Frederick's grandfather was obsessed with them. Priest holes, hidden staircases, tunnels connecting rooms in ways that defy logic." Poirot's gray cells sparked with interest. "You possess knowledge of these passages, madame?" "Frederick showed me once, years ago. During one of Emmeline's lengthy illnesses, he grew lonely." Her sharp eyes met Lady Ashworth's. "We were friends, Emmeline, nothing more. But yes, I know this house contains secrets within its very walls." Theodore Pemberton, who had followed the commotion upstairs, cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps this is relevant. As Sir Frederick's solicitor, I am privy to certain architectural documents. The original building plans are stored in my London office. They detail every passage, every hidden chamber." "And you mentioned this to no one before now?" Colonel Ashworth's voice thundered. "While my niece, if she truly is my niece, is being abducted repeatedly?" I assumed. The plans were merely historical curiosities." Poirot raised his hand for silence. "Monsieur Pemberton, these documents, who else has accessed them?" The solicitor's face paled behind his spectacles. "The files were requested 6 weeks ago, by correspondence. I assumed Lady Ashworth had authorized the inquiry." "I authorized nothing," Lady Ashworth said coldly. "The letter bore your signature, madam, your family seal." "Forged," Poirot declared. "Someone planned this weekend's events meticulously. They studied the house's secrets. They arranged circumstances to their advantage. We are dealing with a criminal of considerable intelligence and patience." Poirot organized a systematic search of Willowmere Cottage. The guests, now suspects, all of them, were divided into pairs. No one was to be left alone. Trust had evaporated like morning mist. He chose to search the East Wing with Mrs. Blackwood, whose sharp observations and apparent candor intrigued him. They moved through dusty corridors, lined with portraits of Ashworth ancestors, their faces stern and accusing in the lamplight. "You knew Sir Frederick intimately, madame. What manner of man was he truly?" Mrs. Blackwood considered the question carefully. "Charming, generous, deeply flawed. Frederick possessed that dangerous combination of wealth and weakness. He wanted to be loved by everyone, and consequently made enemies of those closest to him. His brother, the colonel? Marcus worshipped Frederick as boys, but worship curdled into resentment. Marcus was the elder son, yet Frederick inherited everything, the estate, the title, even the women they both desired. Rose Whitmore, among others, but Rose was different. Rose was carrying Frederick's child when she died. Poirot stopped abruptly. This was known? Suspected, by me, by Marcus, certainly, possibly by Emmeline, though she has perfected the art of strategic blindness. Mrs. Blackwood's voice hardened. If that child survived, If someone rescued it from Rose's womb before or after the drowning, then a legitimate heir to the Ashworth fortune might exist, one whose claim would supersede any arrangement Frederick made in his will. And Sir Frederick's will? What provisions did it contain? That is Pemberton's territory, but I know Frederick intended to leave everything to Emmeline during her lifetime, then to various charitable causes. He never remarried, never acknowledged another child after Elizabeth's disappearance. They had reached a section of corridor where the portraits suddenly ceased. Bare walls stretched toward a heavy oak door, bolted from outside. "What lies beyond, madam?" Mrs. Blackwood hesitated. "The nursery wing. Closed since Elizabeth vanished. Frederick forbade anyone from entering. Even after his death, Emmeline honored his wishes." Poirot examined the bolt. Rusted but recently disturbed. Fresh scratches marked the ancient mechanism. Someone had entered despite prohibitions. "We shall see what secrets the nursery holds." The door protested loudly but yielded. Beyond lay a frozen moment in time. A child's room preserved exactly as it had been 20 years prior. A small bed with embroidered coverlet, porcelain dolls arranged on shelves, a rocking horse with faded mane, picture books scattered across a miniature table, and in the center of the room, illuminated by moonlight streaming through grimy windows, sat Violet Crane. She was unharmed. Her expression was eerily calm. In her lap rested a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. "Miss Crane." Poirot approached cautiously. "You are safe, but you must explain." "I remember this room," Violet whispered. "I remember the dolls, the rocking horse, the view from that window, the pond where Rose died. I remember everything now." "You are saying you are Elizabeth Ashworth?" Violet raised her eyes that suddenly seemed older, harder, all filled with terrible knowledge. "I am saying that I was taken from this room 20 years ago, raised by strangers who called themselves my parents, told nothing of my true identity until 3 months ago, when a letter arrived." "A letter from whom?" "From someone calling themselves the Guardian. Someone who claimed to know the truth about Rose Whitmore's murder, about my abduction, about every sin this family has committed and concealed." She opened the journal. This was Rose's diary, hidden behind loose stones in this very room. She wrote everything, every secret, every betrayal, every name. "And those names, Miss Crane? Who murdered Rose Whitmore?" Before she could answer, the nursery door slammed shut. The bolt scraped into place from outside, and through the keyhole came a whispered voice, disguised, unidentifiable. Now you know too much. Now you all die together." The smell reached them seconds later. Smoke. Rising from below, Willowmere Cottage was burning. Chapter 6. Through flames and shadows. Smoke curled beneath the nursery door like gray serpents seeking prey. Poirot assessed their situation with rapid calculation. The door was solid oak, centuries old, bolted from outside. The windows offered a 2-story drop onto flagstones below. Death awaited in either direction. "Madame, we must remain calm. Panic is the ally of our enemy." Mrs. Blackwood had already moved to the windows, testing the casements with surprising strength for a woman of her years. "These open. The drop is considerable, but perhaps—" "No." Violet rose from her position, clutching Rose's diary against her chest. "There is another way. Rose wrote of it, a passage connecting the nursery to the servants' quarters below. An escape route for the children during fires. Ironic, given our circumstances." "Where, Miss Crane?" quickly." Violet moved to the far wall where faded wallpaper depicted dancing shepherdesses. Her fingers traced patterns invisible to others until a soft click, and a section of wall swung inward, revealing darkness. Rose used this passage to meet Frederick secretly, and later to meet someone else, someone whose identity she feared to write directly. They entered the hidden corridor single file. Poirot produced matches, striking one after another to illuminate their descent. The passage was narrow, dusty, clearly unused for decades. Cobwebs draped their shoulders like ghostly shawls. Mice scattered before their footsteps. Behind them, the nursery had begun to glow orange. Sea flames licked at treasured memories, consuming the rocking horse, the porcelain dolls, the remnants of a childhood stolen 20 years ago. "The journal," Poirot said as they descended. "You mentioned Rose feared to name someone directly, yet she recorded everything. How did she indicate this mysterious person?" Violet's voice echoed strangely in the confined space. "Initials only. M.A. appears repeatedly in the final entries. Rose wrote that M.A. had discovered her condition, that M.A. had threatened consequences, that M.A. demanded she leave Willowmere immediately or face ruin." "M.A.," Mrs. Blackwood repeated. "Marcus Ashworth. Perhaps, or another whose name fits those letters." The passage terminated in a wooden panel. Poirot pressed against it cautiously. It yielded, opening into a storage room filled with forgotten furniture and trunks. Through a grimy window, they observed chaos outside. The household had evacuated onto the front lawn. Servants formed a bucket chain from the garden well, fighting flames that now engulfed the east wing. Colonel Ashworth bellowed commands with military precision. Dr. Vance, despite his wound, attended to a hysterical Mrs. Pemberton. Theodore Pemberton stood apart, his thin face illuminated by firelight, his expression unreadable. And James Hartley was nowhere to be seen. They emerged from the storage room into a ground-floor corridor, coughing smoke from their lungs. Holbrook materialized immediately, his aged face creased with relief. "Monsieur Poirot, thank heavens, we feared you lost." "The fire, Holbrook. How did it begin?" "Oil lamps overturned in the library. Sir, the entire east wing is compromised. I have sent for the village fire brigade, but little Barton is poorly equipped for such catastrophe." "And Mr. Hartley? Where is he?" Holbrook's composure flickered. "I cannot say, sir. He was searching the west wing with Mrs. Pemberton when the fire erupted. Mrs. Pemberton emerged alone, claiming Mr. Hartley had gone ahead. No one has seen him since." Poirot's gray cells arranged possibilities with mechanical precision. James Hartley, the young writer who knew Willowmere's secrets from 3 months cataloging its library. James Hartley, who gazed upon Violet Crane with undisguised devotion. James Hartley, whose presence in this gathering had seemed innocent, but perhaps was anything but. "Monsieur Holbrook, I require information about Mr. Hartley, his background, his connection to this family beyond library work." The butler hesitated. Loyalty and truth warred behind his weathered eyes. Sir Frederick engaged Mr. Hartley through unusual channels, not through professional references or literary societies, through a private inquiry agent. Sir Frederick was investigating something? Someone, sir. In his final months, Sir Frederick became obsessed with discovering what happened to Miss Elizabeth. He believed she lived. He hired investigators across England. Mr. Hartley arrived shortly after one such investigation produced promising leads. Hartley was the lead? I cannot confirm, sir, but Sir Frederick treated Mr. Hartley differently than other employees. Almost paternally. The implications struck Poirot with considerable force. Hartley's age. He would be approximately correct for a child born in 1916. If Rose Whitmore's baby survived somehow, if that child was raised elsewhere under a different name, then James Hartley could be Frederick's illegitimate son. Mrs. Blackwood finished. Another heir, another claimant to the Ashworth fortune. Violet clutched the diary tighter. Rose makes no mention of her baby's fate. Her final entry was written the night before she died. She planned to confront someone, to demand acknowledgement and support. Then nothing. Silence. Because someone silenced her permanently, Poirot concluded. A tremendous crash echoed across the grounds. The east wing roof had collapsed, sending sparks spiraling toward the October sky like desperate prayers. Lady Ashworth wept openly, supported by Colonel Ashworth, to whose face betrayed emotions beyond simple concern. Guilt, perhaps, or fear of exposure. Dr. Vance approached their group, medical bag in hand. Monsieur Poirot, we have a serious problem, beyond the obvious conflagration. What problem, doctor? I examined Miss Crane earlier this evening, before the attack that rendered me unconscious. Vance lowered his voice. She was not merely distressed. She was drugged, something in her sherry, a sedative compound I recognize from my own pharmaceutical supplies, supplies that have been accessed without my knowledge. Someone drugged her before the lights failed, ensuring she would be suggestible, easily manipulated, easily pushed into hidden passages. Precisely. And that same someone, I believe, struck me unconscious and started this fire. We are not dealing with supernatural vengeance. Monsieur Poirot, we are dealing with calculated murder. As if to emphasize his words, a shout arose from the garden's edge. One of the servants had discovered something near the ornamental pond, the same pond where Rose Whitmore had drowned 2 decades prior. A body floated face down in the dark water. They ran. Poirot, despite his years, reached the pond with remarkable speed. Colonel Ashworth and Dr. Vance waded in together, dragging the limp form onto the bank. It was James Hartley. His face was pale, lips blue, eyes staring at nothing. Around his throat, livid bruises formed a damning pattern, finger marks, unmistakable. He had been strangled before being placed in the water, exactly as Rose Whitmore had died 20 years before. History was repeating itself, and the killer walked among them still. Chapter 7. The Dead Man's Truth. The body of James Hartley lay upon the frost-covered grass, illuminated by the hellish glow of Willowmere Cottage burning in the distance. Dr. Vance conducted his examination with grim professionalism, while the household gathered in horrified silence. Dead approximately 30 minutes, Vance pronounced. Strangled manually before submersion, the killer possessed considerable strength. These bruises indicate large hands, powerful grip. Poirot studied the dead man's face, young, handsome, frozen in an expression of surprise rather than fear. Hartley had known his killer, had perhaps trusted them until the final moment. His pockets, doctor. We must examine them. Vance complied, producing a leather wallet, a fountain pen of modest quality, and a folded paper. Poirot opened the paper with careful fingers, she shielding it from the October wind. A birth certificate, dated November 1916. The name read, James Marcus Whitmore. Whitmore, Colonel Ashworth breathed. Good God, he was Rose's son. Not merely Rose's son, Colonel. Poirot's voice was grave. "James Marcus. The middle name is significant, is it not? Marcus, your Christian name. This young man carried your name with him always." The colonel staggered backward as though struck. His military bearing crumbled. "You cannot suggest—" "I never knew. Rose said nothing of a child, because Rose died before she could reveal the truth. But someone knew. Someone arranged for this child to survive, to be raised elsewhere, to eventually return to Willowmere seeking answers." Poirot turned to face the assembled suspects. "And that same someone killed him tonight, just as they killed his mother 20 years ago." Lady Ashworth stepped forward, her elegant features hardened by firelight and fury. "Marcus, is this true? Was Rose carrying your child?" We were together briefly, one summer. Frederick had discarded her, moved on to other distractions. Rose was lonely, heartbroken. I offered comfort. The colonel's voice broke. "I loved her, Emmeline. Truly loved her. When Frederick discovered our relationship, he was enraged, threatened to disinherit me entirely, cast me out of the family." "So you killed her to preserve your position?" Mrs. Blackwood's accusation sliced through the night air. "No, I would never harm Rose. Never." Tears streamed down the colonel's weathered face. "The night she died, I was in London. Military obligations. I received word of her drowning 3 days later. By then, she was already buried. The inquest concluded. Everything finished." "A convenient alibi," Pemberton muttered, his nervous demeanor momentarily replaced by suspicion. "Military records can be falsified, witnesses purchased." "How dare you—" "Monsieur, enough." Poirot raised his hand for silence. "Accusations without evidence serve only confusion. We must examine what we know with certainty." He began pacing, his patent leather shoes crunching against frozen grass. Behind him, Willowmere Cottage continued to burn, firefighters from Little Barton finally arriving with inadequate equipment and overwhelmed expressions. First, Rose Whitmore was murdered in October 1916. She was pregnant with a child whose paternity remains disputed between 2 brothers. Second, that child survived, raised under the name James Whitmore, until he came to Willowmere 3 months ago, apparently at Sir Frederick's invitation. Third, Violet interjected, clutching Rose's diary against her chest. Someone abducted Elizabeth Ashworth shortly after Rose's death, someone who wanted the legitimate heir removed. Indeed, mademoiselle, the crimes are connected. Rose's murder, Elizabeth's abduction. And now, 20 years later, 2 people claiming Ashworth heritage have returned, yourself and the late Mr. Hartley. One of you, perhaps both, represented threats to someone's carefully constructed arrangements. Poirot requested that everyone retire to the gardener's cottage, the only habitable structure remaining on the estate. The ancient building was cramped, dusty, but mercifully intact. Servants brought lanterns, blankets, and what provisions could be salvaged. In this humble setting, social distinctions collapsed. Lady Ashworth sat upon a wooden crate. Colonel Ashworth slumped against stone walls. Dr. Vance tended to Mrs. Pemberton's persistent hysteria, while Theodore Pemberton calculated losses in a leather notebook, professional habit overcoming human tragedy. Mrs. Blackwood alone remained standing, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Poirot addressed them with the solemnity of a judge pronouncing sentence. "Among us stands a murderer, someone who killed James Hartley tonight, someone who, I suspect, also murdered Rose Whitmore 2 decades ago or knows precisely who did. The fire was intended to destroy evidence, to create chaos, to eliminate additional victims. That plan has failed. Then arrest someone, Pemberton demanded. You are a detective, are you not? Detect? Patience, monsieur. The truth requires construction, brick by brick. Poirot turned to Violet. The diary, mademoiselle. You mentioned Rose's final entries. Read them aloud, please. Violet opened the leather-bound journal, its pages crackling with age. Her voice trembled but gained strength as she read. October 14th, 1916. M.A. visited again tonight. The threats grow worse. I am to leave Willowmere immediately or face consequences. But where can I go? I carry a child. I have no family, no resources. M.A. offers money for silence, but silence about what? Everyone knows Frederick's nature. Everyone suspects Marcus's involvement. What secret could be worth such desperation? She turned the page. October 15th, 1916. I have discovered M.A.'s true fear. It is not scandal regarding the child. It is something else entirely, something concerning little Elizabeth. I overheard a conversation tonight, whispers in the nursery wing, plans being made, terrible plans. I must warn Frederick. I must protect the child. Tomorrow I shall confront M.A. directly. God help me. There are no further entries? Poirot asked. None. Rose died that night, October 15th, 1916. Silence descended upon the gardener's cottage. Outside, the ruins of Willowmere smoldered, sending smoke signals toward an indifferent sky. M.A., Poirot repeated. The identity of this person is crucial. Colonel Ashworth's initials fit, Marcus Ashworth. But consider other possibilities. His gaze swept the room, settling upon an unexpected target. Madame Blackwood, your maiden name, before marriage. What was it? The elderly widow stiffened, irrelevant to these proceedings. Indulge me, madame. A long pause, then barely audible. Abbott, Margaret Abbott. Margaret Abbott, M.A. Poirot's mustache twitched. And your relationship with Sir Frederick, you described yourselves as friends during Lady Ashworth's illnesses. But perhaps friendship evolved into something deeper, something that threatened established arrangements? Mrs. Blackwood's sharp composure finally cracked. You know nothing, Monsieur Poirot, nothing about the sacrifices I made, the secrets I kept, the child I— She stopped abruptly, realizing her error. The child you what, madame? Please, complete your confession. But Mrs. Blackwood had retreated into stony silence, her thin lips pressed together in an impenetrable line. The truth, Poirot sensed, was finally emerging from shadows. But dawn remained hours away, and the killer was growing desperate. Somewhere in the darkness, a clock struck midnight, and the game continued. Chapter 8. Confessions by Candlelight. The gardener's cottage had grown colder. Wind whistled through gaps in ancient stonework. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows upon walls that had witnessed generations of secrets. Poirot allowed the silence to stretch, understanding that pressure sometimes extracts truth more effectively than questions. Mrs. Blackwood finally broke. Very well, Monsieur Poirot. You wish for confessions? You shall have mine. She lowered herself onto a dusty chair, suddenly appearing every one of her 70 years. But understand, what I did for love. Misguided, perhaps. Destructive, certainly. But love, nonetheless. Lady Ashworth leaned forward. Dorothy, what are you saying? I am saying, Emmeline, that your husband and I were lovers for 15 years, from 1910 until his death. While you suffered through imaginary illnesses, convenient excuses to avoid marital duties, Frederick found comfort in my arms. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Lady Ashworth's face drained of color. Colonel Ashworth muttered an oath. Dr. Vance diplomatically studied his medical bag. But that is not the confession that matters, Mrs. Blackwood continued. The true confession concerns Elizabeth. My daughter? Lady Ashworth's voice cracked. What about my daughter? She was never your daughter, Emmeline, not by blood. Mrs. Blackwood's sharp eyes glistened with unshed tears. Elizabeth was mine, Frederick's child, yes, but born from my womb, not yours. Your pregnancies always failed. My 3 miscarriages before Frederick sought alternatives. Lies, vicious lies. Truth, painful truth. Mrs. Blackwood rose, pacing the small space with agitated energy. I bore Frederick a daughter in secret. We arranged for you to feign pregnancy simultaneously, your mysterious illnesses providing perfect cover. When Elizabeth arrived, she was presented as the legitimate Ashworth heir. No one questioned. No one suspected. Poirot's gray cells absorbed this information, rearranging the puzzle pieces accordingly. And Rose Whitmore? How does she connect to this deception? Rose discovered everything. Nursemaids observe what others miss. She found correspondence between Frederick and myself, letters detailing our arrangement. Or she threatened exposure unless Frederick acknowledged her own child, the baby she carried. You killed her to protect your secret? Mrs. Blackwood spun to face Poirot, her composure shattering completely. No, I threatened her, yes, demanded her silence, offered money for her departure. But I never touched her. When Rose died, I was as shocked as anyone. Then who strangled Rose Whitmore and placed her in the pond? I do not know, monsieur. I have spent 20 years wondering. 20 years fearing that one day truth would emerge and destroy everything I sacrificed to build. Violet Crane had listened to this revelation with strange calmness. Now she spoke, her voice carrying an authority that surprised everyone. If Elizabeth was truly your biological daughter, Mrs. Blackwood, then explain my existence. I was raised as Margaret Crane's child, Lady Ashworth's sister. Yet I remember this house. I remember the nursery, the dolls, the view of the pond. Mrs. Blackwood studied Violet with new-found intensity. Margaret Crane had no children. She died childless in 1920. Everyone knew this. Then who am I? The question echoed through the cottage. Identities layered upon identities, lies built upon lies. The Ashworth family history was revealing itself as elaborate fiction. Poirot approached Violet gently. Mademoiselle, you mentioned receiving a letter 3 months ago, a letter from someone calling themselves the Guardian. Do you still possess this correspondence? Violet retrieved a folded paper from her dress pocket, miraculously preserved despite the evening's chaos. Poirot examined it beneath candlelight. The handwriting was educated, all precise, feminine. The message was brief. You are not who you believe yourself to be. Your true name is Elizabeth Ashworth. You were stolen from Willowmere Cottage in January 1917. Those who took you are dead. Those who arranged your theft still live. Come to Little Barton. Discover your birthright. Claim what was stolen. The Guardian. The Guardian, Poirot repeated. Someone who knew the truth about Elizabeth's abduction. Someone who waited 20 years to reveal it. His eyes swept the room. Someone, I suspect, who is present in this very cottage. Theodore Pemberton suddenly rose, his thin face flushed with guilty knowledge. I must confess something that may be relevant. Proceed, monsieur. Sir Frederick contacted me 6 months before his death. He had received similar correspondence, anonymous letters revealing family secrets, letters that tormented him with implications about Elizabeth's survival. He believed someone was deliberately destroying him, piece by piece. And you said nothing of this until now. Client confidentiality. Frederick was my most important account. I could not. A man is dead tonight, Monsieur Pemberton. A woman was murdered 20 years ago. Confidentiality means nothing against such crimes. Pemberton wilted under Poirot's condemnation. There is more. Frederick changed his will repeatedly during those final months. The current version, the legal document, leaves everything to Emmeline during her lifetime. But there were other versions, secret provisions. Provisions for whom? For any child of his blood who could prove legitimate claim. Frederick suspected Elizabeth lived. He wanted to ensure she would inherit, regardless of circumstances. This information, Poirot said slowly, provides powerful motive for murder. Anyone threatened by Elizabeth's return, anyone whose inheritance depended upon her remaining lost, would benefit from silencing her permanently. All eyes turned to Lady Ashworth. The widow had sat motionless throughout these revelations, her face an unreadable mask. Now she rose with terrible dignity. You suspect me, Monsieur Poirot? You believe I murdered Rose Whitmore, abducted Elizabeth, killed James Hartley tonight? I suspect everyone, madame, until evidence proves otherwise. Then suspect this. Lady Ashworth's voice turned to ice. I have known about Frederick's affair with Dorothy for years. I have known Elizabeth was not my biological child since her birth. I have known about Rose Whitmore's pregnancy, Marcus's involvement, every sordid detail of this family's corruption. I knew, and I said nothing, did nothing, because maintaining appearances was my sacred duty. Yet someone acted, madame. Someone killed. Someone kidnapped. Not me. Lady Ashworth moved toward the cottage door, her silhouette framed against the smoldering ruins of her ancestral home. I have spent my life preserving the Ashworth name. Destroying it would destroy myself. She stepped outside into the cold October night, and in that moment a shot rang out, sharp, echoing, unmistakable. Lady Ashworth crumpled to the ground. Chaos erupted once more. Dr. Vance rushed forward. Colonel Ashworth shouted commands. Poirot scanned the darkness for the shooter, and seeing nothing but shadows and smoke. The killer had struck again, and dawn was still hours away. Chapter 9. The Wounded Truth. Dr. Vance worked frantically upon Lady Ashworth's prone form. Blood seeped from her shoulder, staining the frost-covered ground crimson. Her breathing was shallow but steady, the wound serious but not immediately fatal. The bullet passed through, Vance announced. She requires proper medical attention. The village doctor must be summoned immediately. Colonel Ashworth dispatched Holbrook toward Little Barton, the elderly butler moving with surprising speed despite his years. The remaining household retreated into the gardener's cottage, dragging Lady Ashworth's unconscious body with them. Poirot stood alone in the darkness, his keen eyes searching for any sign of the shooter. The shot had originated from the tree line beyond the ornamental pond, the same pond where Rose Whitmore had drowned, where James Hartley's body had been discovered. Someone was using that location deliberately. symbolically. The pond was central to this tragedy, both past and present. Monsieur Poirot? Violet appeared beside him, her face ghostly pale in the moonlight. You should come inside. The killer clearly has a firearm. The killer has shown themselves to be methodical, mademoiselle. They do not fire randomly. Lady Ashworth was targeted specifically. Poirot stroked his mustache thoughtfully. But why? She claimed innocence. She spoke of maintaining appearances, preserving the family name. What threat did she pose? Perhaps she knew something she had not yet revealed. Précisément, a Lady Ashworth was preparing to make a statement. Her movement toward the door, her position, she was about to speak further. The killer silenced her before she could. They returned to the cottage, where controlled chaos reigned. Dr. Vance had stabilized Lady Ashworth, who remained unconscious upon a makeshift bed of blankets and straw. Mrs. Pemberton sobbed quietly in her husband's arms. Colonel Ashworth paced like a caged animal, his military discipline barely containing explosive emotion. And Mrs. Blackwood sat alone in the corner, her sharp eyes fixed upon nothing, lost in memories or calculations. Poirot addressed the diminished gathering with renewed determination. We are running short of time, mesdames et messieurs. The killer grows desperate, willing now to use firearms, seek to attack openly, rather than through hidden passages and subtle manipulations. This desperation tells us something important. What does it tell us? Pemberton asked, his voice trembling. That the killer's plan is unraveling, that someone in this room possesses knowledge that threatens exposure, that before dawn arrives, bringing police and proper investigation, the killer intends to eliminate all threats. Then we are all in danger, Mrs. Pemberton wailed. Not equally, madame. The killer has specific targets. Rose Whitmore knew secrets and died. James Hartley represented a claim upon the Ashworth inheritance and died. Lady Ashworth was silenced mid-confession. The pattern suggests that those with knowledge or claims are vulnerable. Poirot turned to Violet. You represent the greatest threat of all, mademoiselle. If you are truly Elizabeth Ashworth, you inherit everything. Your existence invalidates whatever arrangements the killer has constructed. Then why am I still alive? An excellent question. Perhaps because your identity remained uncertain until tonight. Perhaps because the killer required confirmation before acting. Or perhaps... Poirot paused, a new possibility forming. Perhaps because the killer intends to use you somehow, to manipulate your claim to their advantage. Colonel Ashworth stopped pacing. Explain yourself, Poirot. These riddles accomplish nothing. Consider, Colonel, if Elizabeth Ashworth returns and dies without heirs, her inheritance passes according to Frederick's will. But if Elizabeth Ashworth returns, marries, and then dies, her spouse might claim conjugal rights to the estate. All eyes turned to the empty space where James Hartley should have stood, the young writer who had gazed upon Violet with undisguised devotion, the young man who had catalogued Willowmere's library for 3 months, learning its secrets, positioning himself perfectly. Hartley, Colonel Ashworth growled. He intended to marry the girl, claim the fortune through her. Perhaps, but Hartley is dead, murdered before any such marriage could occur. Poirot's eyes narrowed, which suggests that someone else had similar plans and eliminated the competition. Mrs. Blackwood suddenly rose from her corner, her aged frame trembling with suppressed emotion. Enough of this endless speculation. I can bear it no longer. She approached Poirot with desperate intensity. Oh, there is something I withheld, something crucial. Speak, madame. The night Rose Whitmore died, I was not in London as I claimed. I was here, at Willowmere. I witnessed everything. Gasps echoed through the cottage. Even Poirot's composed features registered surprise. You witnessed the murder? I witnessed what preceded it. I was in Frederick's study, waiting for him. From the window I saw Rose walking toward the pond. She was not alone. Someone followed her, a figure in dark clothing, face obscured. They argued. I saw Rose gesture angrily, saw the other person advance. Then they moved beyond my line of sight, toward the water's edge. And you said nothing for 20 years. I was terrified, monsieur. Terrified that speaking would expose my own presence, my affair with Frederick, my role in Elizabeth's irregular birth. Silence seemed the only protection. But you saw the figure, even obscured. Surely you formed impressions, height, build, manner of movement. Mrs. Blackwood closed her eyes, summoning memories long suppressed. Tall, moving with purpose, something familiar in the gait, someone I knew, though I could not identify them precisely. Male or female? A long pause. I assumed male. The height suggested it. But now, after all these years, I wonder. Her eyes opened, fixing upon a specific target. I wonder if I was mistaken. Poirot followed her gaze toward Cecily Pemberton. The plump woman, who had spent the evening in apparent hysterics, suddenly grew very still. Her nervous laughter ceased. Her tear-streaked face hardened into something unrecognizable. Cecily? Theodore Pemberton released his wife, stepping backward in confusion. What is she implying? Nothing of consequence, Cecily Pemberton replied. But her voice had changed, deeper, steadier, stripped of the fluttering feminine performance she had maintained throughout. Poirot studied her with fresh perspective. Madame Pemberton, your maiden name. What was it? Smith. Common enough. And your connection to Little Barton before your marriage? None whatsoever. Theodore and I met in London. I had never visited this village until tonight. Strange, then, that you knew precisely which passage led from the drawing room. Earlier this evening, during the confusion, you directed servants through corridors without hesitation. You navigated Willowmere as though born here. Cecily Pemberton's mask slipped further. Behind the plump cheeks and nervous manner, something cold emerged, something calculating. You are observant, Monsieur Poirot, perhaps too observant. Her hand reached into her reticule and emerged holding a small revolver, aimed directly at Poirot's heart. Now, she said calmly, we shall have truth, but on my terms. Chapter 10. The Unmasking. The revolver gleamed in candlelight, its barrel steady despite the trembling that had characterized Cecily Pemberton throughout the evening. That trembling, Poirot now understood, had been masterful performance, calculated misdirection designed to render her invisible among more dramatic suspects. "Nobody moves," Cecily commanded. "Holbrook has gone for the doctor. The servants are occupied with the fire. We have perhaps 30 minutes before interruption." Theodore Pemberton stared at his wife with dawning horror. Cecily, what madness is this? Lower that weapon immediately. Silence, Theodore. You have served your purpose admirably. A respectable husband, access to Ashworth legal documents, perfect cover for years of careful planning. Her lips curved into a smile, devoid of warmth. But you were always a means to an end, nothing more. Madame Pemberton, Poirot said calmly, or should I address you by your true name? For Cecily Pemberton is a fiction, n'est-ce pas? Clever Belgian. Yes, Cecily Pemberton was constructed specifically for this purpose. My real name is Catherine Whitmore. The name struck like lightning. Whitmore, Rose's surname. James Hartley had been born James Marcus Whitmore. You are related to Rose, Violet breathed. Her sister? Her twin, actually. Identical in appearance, though not in fortune. Rose was the pretty one, the charming one, so the one who secured positions in wealthy households while I scraped existence in Manchester factories. Bitterness saturated every word. Rose wrote to me of her conquest, Frederick Ashworth, heir to a great estate. She believed he would marry her. She believed love conquered all obstacles. But Sir Frederick had other intentions, Poirot supplied. Frederick used her, discarded her, then watched his brother do the same. When Rose discovered she was pregnant, she thought it leverage. She threatened exposure, demanded acknowledgement. Instead, she received death. Colonel Ashworth stepped forward despite the weapon. I did not kill Rose. I loved her. Love. Catherine spat the word. Your love was meaningless, Colonel. You lacked courage to protect her from your family's machinations. You let her drown while pursuing military glory in London. Then who killed her? Mrs. Blackwood demanded. You clearly know. Catherine's revolver swung toward the elderly widow. You witnessed it yourself, Mrs. Blackwood. You saw the figure following Rose to the pond. You simply refused to recognize what you observed. I saw someone tall, dark-clothed. You saw Lady Emmeline Ashworth, wearing her husband's overcoat to disguise her figure, moving with purpose toward the woman who threatened her carefully constructed world. All eyes turned to Lady Ashworth's unconscious form. The wounded woman remained still, breathing shallowly, oblivious to accusations swirling above her. Lady Ashworth murdered Rose? Violet's voice trembled. She protected her position, her false claim to motherhood, or her control over the Ashworth fortune. Catherine's gun hand remained steady. Emmeline knew Rose carried Frederick's child. She knew exposure would reveal Elizabeth's true parentage, that her supposed daughter was actually Dorothy Blackwood's offspring. Everything Emmeline possessed depended upon maintaining elaborate fictions. Poirot's gray cells processed this accusation against existing evidence. Yet Lady Ashworth claimed ignorance of nothing. She admitted knowing everything, the affairs, Elizabeth's parentage, all secrets. Words spoken to deflect suspicion. Emmeline Ashworth has survived decades through strategic confession of lesser sins to conceal greater ones. Catherine's smile turned predatory. Tonight, she was about to confess more. I could not allow that. Not before my plan reached completion. You shot Lady Ashworth. A necessary interruption. She will survive. I am not wasteful. But she will remain silent until I achieve my objective. Theodore Pemberton had collapsed onto a wooden crate, his thin face gray with shock. His entire marriage had been revelation, a carefully constructed trap in which he served as unwitting accomplice. The architectural plans, he whispered. You made me retrieve them. You studied them for months. Every passage, every hidden chamber, every secret this house contains. Catherine nodded without remorse. I needed to understand Willowmere completely before striking. Your legal access made everything possible. And James Hartley? Poirot asked. He was your nephew, Rose's son, raised elsewhere after her murder. Did he know your true identity? Pain flickered across Catherine's controlled features, the first genuine emotion she had displayed. James knew nothing. He believed himself alone in the world, the orphaned child of a tragic nursemaid. I watched him from distance for 20 years, protecting him, guiding him toward Willowmere through careful manipulation. You sent the letters. You were the guardian. I arranged for James to be discovered by Frederick's investigators. I ensured he would be brought to Willowmere as library cataloger. I intended for him to marry Elizabeth, to unite Rose's bloodline with the Ashworth fortune she deserved. Catherine's voice cracked. He was not supposed to die. Then who killed him? I do not know. The admission exploded from her, the revolver wavering momentarily. My plan was perfect. James would court Elizabeth, Violet as she calls herself. They would marry. The combined inheritance would pass to Rose's grandchildren. Justice would be achieved. But someone interfered. Someone who understood my scheme. Someone who strangled James exactly as Rose was strangled, sending a message. Catherine's eyes swept the room with renewed suspicion. Someone in this cottage is a murderer, and it is not me. Poirot seized upon her uncertainty. You orchestrated tonight's events, the threatening notes, the mysterious figure, the supernatural atmosphere designed to unsettle. But the killings were not yours. The notes were mine. The ghost was theatrical manipulation, white robes, strategic appearances. I wanted to frighten this family, to make them confess their sins. Catherine's composure crumbled further. But James, my nephew, as someone took him from me before justice could be served. And the fire? Not mine. Why would I destroy evidence I had spent years gathering? The fire served someone else's purpose entirely. Poirot turned slowly, surveying the remaining suspects with fresh calculation. Colonel Ashworth, devastated by revelations of Rose's fate. Mrs. Blackwood, exposed as Elizabeth's biological mother. Theodore Pemberton, innocent dupe in his wife's conspiracy. Dr. Vance, silent observer throughout. Dr. Vance. The physician had said almost nothing since Lady Ashworth's shooting. He knelt beside her unconscious form, medical bag open, hands busy with bandages and instruments. Dr. Vance, Poirot said quietly, you have been notably silent during these revelations. Perhaps you wish to contribute. Vance looked up, his handsome features arranged in professional concern. I am a physician, Monsieur Poirot. My focus has been upon my patient. Your patient whom you conveniently attended throughout the evening. Your patient whose sedated sherry you diagnosed so precisely because you prescribed the sedative yourself. The accusation hung in the air. Catherine's revolver swung toward the doctor, her eyes widening with sudden comprehension. The drug in Violet's drink, you administered it. Preposterous. Your medical bag was accessed without your knowledge, your own words earlier tonight. But what if that claim was misdirection? What if you accessed your own supplies to create false evidence of intrusion? Vance rose slowly, his elegant composure intact. Speculation without proof. Then explain your presence at Willowmere. Lady Ashworth mentioned you were an old family friend. But how old? How intimate? Poirot advanced despite Catherine's weapon. What secrets do you share with this family, Dr. Sebastian Vance? The doctor's mask finally slipped, and beneath it, Poirot glimpsed something ancient and terrible. Very well, Vance whispered. You want truth? The truth is older than Rose Whitmore, older than all of you." He reached into his medical bag, not for instruments of healing, but for a second revolver, which he aimed at Poirot's heart. "The truth," Dr. Vance said, "is that I am the eldest Ashworth brother, and everything you believe about this family is wrong." Chapter 11. The Final Truth. 2. Revolvers now dominated the cramped gardener's cottage. Catherine Whitmore's weapon remained trained upon the assembly. Dr. Sebastian Vance's aimed at Poirot. Between them stood the remaining suspects, frozen in tableaux of fear and confusion. "The eldest Ashworth brother," Poirot repeated slowly. "But Sir Frederick was the younger son. Colonel Marcus was elder. There was no third brother." There is." Vance's cultured voice carried decades of suppressed rage. "Sebastian Ashworth, born 1870, 3 years before Marcus, 5 before Frederick, erased from family history, committed to an asylum at age 12, declared dead to society." Colonel Ashworth staggered backward. "Impossible. Father never mentioned." "Father arranged everything. Mother's shame had to be concealed. Her firstborn son? Illegitimate, conceived before marriage with a traveling musician, could not be acknowledged. So I was hidden, locked away, forgotten." Vance's handsome features contorted with ancient pain. "While you and Frederick inherited wealth, privilege, the Ashworth name, I rotted in institutional darkness." "How did you escape?" Mrs. Blackwood whispered. "I did not escape. I was released. At 21, legally adult, no longer subject to parental control. The asylum doctors found nothing wrong with me. I had been imprisoned not for madness but for inconvenience." Vance laughed bitterly. "I reinvented myself, studied medicine in Edinburgh under assumed name, built respectable career, waited. Waited for what? For opportunity, for revenge, for reclamation of everything stolen from me." Poirot's gray cells assembled the final pieces with mechanical precision. "You returned to Little Barton as family physician, positioning yourself perfectly. Trusted, intimate, invisible. Frederick never recognized me. How could he? He was 5 when I disappeared. Marcus was 8, old enough to remember, but I had changed. Years of institutional deprivation alter appearances considerably." Vance smiled coldly. "I became their trusted doctor. I treated their ailments, heard their confessions, learned their secrets, including Rose Whitmore's pregnancy. Rose confided everything to me. Professional confidence between patient and physician. She trusted me with her fears, her hopes, her knowledge of family corruptions." Vance's expression softened momentarily. "I genuinely liked Rose. Her death was unfortunate." Catherine's gun hand trembled. "You killed her. You killed my sister." "No, Madame Whitmore, or should I say Madame Pemberton. Your conspiracy has been impressive, but your conclusions are wrong. I did not kill Rose." "Then who did?" Violet demanded. "The same person who has killed twice tonight. The same person who started the fire. The same person who has manipulated everyone from the shadows." Vance's revolver swung toward a new target. "Holbrook." Silence. "Holbrook is fetching the village doctor," Colonel Ashworth protested. "He left 20 minutes ago." "Holbrook never left the estate. He circled back immediately. He has been watching from outside, waiting for the optimal moment." Vance raised his voice. "You may enter now, old friend. The performance has concluded." The cottage door creaked open. Holbrook stepped inside, but transformed. The elderly butler's stooped posture had vanished. He stood straight, tall, his weathered face hardened into something dangerous. In his hand, a hunting rifle. Dr. Vance. Holbrook's voice had lost its deferential tone. You always were too clever." Poirot assessed this new development with remarkable calm. 3 weapons now, 3 conspirators with separate agendas, truth fragmenting into ever more complex patterns. "Holbrook," he said, "your true identity, s'il vous plaît. We have dispensed with pretense." The butler, former butler, smiled grimly. Henry Blackwood, Dorothy's husband, supposedly dead these 15 years. Mrs. Blackwood screamed. Genuine shock, not performance. She collapsed against the wall, staring at the man she had mourned for over a decade. "Henry, I buried you. I attended your funeral. I saw your body. You saw what I arranged for you to see. A pauper's corpse, similar build, face destroyed beyond recognition. Convenient fire. Tragic accident. Perfect disappearance." Henry Blackwood moved into the candlelight, his features becoming clear. "I discovered everything, Dorothy. Your affair with Frederick, Elizabeth's true parentage, our entire marriage built upon lies. So you faked your death, returned as a servant? I became Holbrook 3 years after my death. The original butler had retired. References were forged. Frederick, consumed by grief over Elizabeth's disappearance, noticed nothing. Henry's voice hardened. I became invisible. The perfect position for observation, for planning, for justice. Justice, Poirot repeated. An interesting word. What justice required Rose Whitmore's death? James Hartley's murder? The attack on Lady Ashworth? Rose Whitmore was collateral damage. I followed her that night, yes, but only to observe. When she reached the pond, someone was already there, or someone who strangled her and held her beneath the water until movement ceased. Who? Lady Emmeline Ashworth. Catherine's accusation was correct. I witnessed everything from the tree line. Henry's rifle remained steady. I could have intervened. I chose not to. Rose's death served my larger purpose, destabilizing Frederick, increasing his guilt, hastening his decline. And Elizabeth's abduction? My work entirely. Frederick's daughter, Dorothy's biological child, represented everything I hated. I took her from the nursery, delivered her to associates who raised her elsewhere under false identity. His eyes found Violet. You survived because killing a child exceeded even my thirst for revenge. Violet trembled but held her ground. You destroyed my life, stole my identity, my family. I destroyed Frederick Ashworth's life. Oh, that was the intention. That was accomplished. Henry showed no remorse. When Frederick died believing Elizabeth lost forever, my revenge was complete. I could have departed then. Should have. But you remained, Poirot observed. Why? Because new opportunities emerged. Catherine Whitmore's conspiracy, Dr. Vance's separate machinations, competing schemes converging upon Willowmere. Henry laughed harshly. I could not resist orchestrating the finale. You killed James Hartley. The boy represented inconvenient complications. Catherine's plan to unite the inheritances threatened my own arrangements. I eliminated the obstacle. Henry shrugged. He died as his mother died. Poetic symmetry. And the fire? Destruction of evidence. Destruction of this cursed house. A destruction of everything the Ashworth name represents. 3 conspirators, 3 weapons, 3 separate vendettas intersecting in blood and flame. Poirot understood now that Willowmere's tragedy was not single murder, but collision of murderous intentions spanning decades. Fascinating, he murmured. Lady Ashworth killed Rose Whitmore to protect her position. Henry Blackwood abducted Elizabeth and later killed James Hartley for revenge. Catherine Whitmore orchestrated tonight's supernatural theatrics seeking justice for her sister. And Dr. Vance, Sebastian Ashworth, positioned himself for eventual inheritance claim. Correct in essence, Vance acknowledged, though my methods were subtler than murder. I intended to reveal my true identity after eliminating other claimants through legal challenges. Frederick's will contains provisions for blood relatives. As eldest surviving Ashworth, my claim supersedes all others. Except, Colonel Ashworth interrupted, you are illegitimate. Father's indiscretion before marriage, no legal standing whatsoever. Details to be argued in courts. My documentation is extensive, my case compelling. Catherine's weapon swung between the two men. Enough legal philosophy. My nephew is dead. Someone must answer. Henry Blackwood has confessed, Poirot interjected quickly. He strangled James Hartley. He admitted this freely. Then Henry Blackwood dies. Madame, I cannot permit. Catherine fired. The bullet caught Henry Blackwood in the chest. He staggered, surprise flooding his weathered features, then collapsed. His rifle clattered across stone floor. Vance moved instantly, his own weapon discharging toward Catherine. She twisted, the bullet grazing her shoulder, returning fire. Chaos erupted, screams, smoke, the acrid smell of gunpowder. Poirot dove toward Henry's fallen rifle, his aging body protesting the athletic demand. His fingers found cold metal. He rose, aiming at the ceiling, and fired. The tremendous report silenced everything. Enough, Poirot commanded. Enough death, enough revenge, enough. Catherine clutched her wounded shoulder, revolver dangling loosely. Vance had taken cover behind furniture, his weapon empty. Henry Blackwood lay motionless, blood pooling beneath him. Outside, shouts arose. The village fire brigade, the Dr. Holbrook had supposedly summoned. Police, perhaps. Authority finally arriving. It ends here, Poirot declared. Dr. Vance, you will surrender yourself for conspiracy and fraud. Madame Pemberton, Madame Whitmore, you will face charges for tonight's shooting and related crimes. The courts will determine appropriate justice. And Lady Ashworth? Violet asked quietly. She murdered Rose Whitmore. She started everything. Poirot looked at the unconscious woman, her breathing shallow, her face peaceful, despite surrounding carnage. 20 years ago, she had strangled a nursemaid to protect false position. That single act had spawned endless consequences: abduction, conspiracy, murder, destruction. Lady Ashworth will face the law, Poirot confirmed. All crimes will be answered, all secrets revealed. The Ashworth family's corruption ends tonight. Dawn broke over the ruins of Willowmere Cottage. Smoke still rose from charred timbers. Police from Little Barton secured the scene. Bodies were removed. Henry Blackwood dead, James Hartley dead. Their stories concluded in violence. Lady Ashworth survived surgery in the village clinic. She would recover sufficiently to stand trial. Catherine Whitmore was arrested. Her 20-year conspiracy documented and dismantled. Dr. Sebastian Vance surrendered peacefully, his claims upon the Ashworth inheritance forever extinguished. Colonel Marcus Ashworth, broken by revelations, retreated to London and quiet obscurity. Mrs. Dorothy Blackwood, confronted with her husband's survival and crimes, suffered collapse, requiring extended hospitalization. Theodore Pemberton, innocent dupe throughout, returned to London to rebuild a life shattered by matrimonial deception. And Violet Crane, Elizabeth Ashworth, stood alone before the smoking ruins of her birthright. Poirot approached her gently. "Mademoiselle, you have endured much, too much for any person. I came seeking identity. I found only destruction. You found truth. Painful, yes, but truth nonetheless. Your parents, your true parents, were Frederick Ashworth and Dorothy Blackwood, both flawed, both responsible for tragedies beyond counting. But you are not them. Their sins need not become your inheritance." Violet turned to face him, tears streaming. "What inheritance remains? The house is destroyed. The fortune will be consumed by legal battles. The family name carries only shame. Material inheritance, perhaps, but you possess something more valuable, knowledge of who you are. See freedom from the lies that imprisoned you." Poirot offered his handkerchief. "Build a new life, mademoiselle, one uncorrupted by Ashworth history." Violet accepted the handkerchief, dabbing her eyes. "And Rose Whitmore? James Hartley? Do they receive justice?" "Their killers are identified. Lady Ashworth and Henry Blackwood will answer for their crimes, one in court, one before higher authority." Poirot paused. "Justice is imperfect, mademoiselle. It cannot restore the dead, but it acknowledges their suffering. It ensures their stories are remembered." A motor car arrived, arranged by Poirot to transport him back to London. He tipped his hat to Violet, to the village constable, to the ruins of a family destroyed by secrets too long concealed. "The cottage crime," he murmured, settling into the vehicle. "Not one crime, but many. And not one criminal, but several. And at the center, always the same poison, lies that fester until they erupt in violence." The motor car departed Little Barton as church bells tolled morning service. Behind, Willowmere Cottage smoldered. Before, London awaited, civilized, ordered, far removed from rural horrors. Yet Hercule Poirot knew that evil recognized no geography, that secrets lurked in mansions and cottages alike, that wherever human hearts harbored hatred, crime would follow. He stroked his magnificent mustache, closed his eyes, and allowed the gray cells to rest, until the next mystery called.